Hey everyone, this is Isaiah. If you don't already know. Anyways, a couple of the things that stood out to me over the quarter were, I think in terms of just the assignments, were the Kamal Bell's TED Talk as well as the Black Food Geographies video. Um, and for a couple different reasons. But before we get to that, I'll give you a little bit more of a background on kind of the volunteer work that I did this quarter and just overall volunteer work that I've done. And so this quarter, I've been working with a church in my area. It's called Open Door Church. I live down in Texas, so you guys probably haven't heard of it, but it's called Open Door Church. And every other Saturday, they do huge food outreaches. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of food, and this is just at one area. And then the other place is a food bank near me called PHP, or People Helping People. And basically, what you kind of do there is you go in and you get food at PHP. At least you get these food. You box them up and you hand them out to people who come in. And then with Open Door, it's a little different, and so they actually have people driving through, and we have these like crates and things of food, and we hand them out and we give people food. Um, I think a couple profound things that were kind of like, whoa, this is a little different. With at least with Open Doors, that we actually prayed beforehand, and I thought that was kind of interesting. But I guess that's beside the point of the food geography and the what the final presentation is really about, and that's really connecting, as it says, like the themes of what we talked about in class, and also the volunteer work. And so I've done volunteer work my entire life. When I was very, very young, I would, my mom's friend actually would make sandwiches. And not just a few sandwiches, we made like 250 sandwiches, maybe even more. And it was just egg salad sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, you name it. And we'd fill these, fill up lunch bags, and then we would, have clothes and go to the homeless shelter, and then they would all come and then, pick out whatever they need, hygiene items as well. I've also worked with the UGM. My church was partnered at the time. This was in Seattle, Union Gospel Mission, and it's kind of like a similar thing. But rather than being at the homeless shelter, we would actually pack up vans and drive out to different camps and areas that we know that there's high populations of homeless people. And so I've done this my entire life, and it was almost kind of something that was, I wouldn't say it was necessarily not a choice. And I've done other things too. I've gone to Northwest Harvest, and so I've done a lot of this stuff, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this myself, or it was kind of like my parents were wanting to do something, or they suggested something, so I went along with it and I did it, and I really enjoyed it. But I think something I never really thought of until this assignment, trying to actually connect the themes, was what are the different impacts, and well, with me and with also the community members. I think with the community members that we're helping out, I think it's a little bit more obvious. We're giving them food where they don't have food, and we're helping them out in their struggle. And so I think that's something that is kind of like obvious and that I've always thought of. But and so that's why I had to really look back at like what is something that's kind of different to me, or what is something that I haven't thought about. And so the I think the Black Food Geographies video, as well as the Kamal Bell's TED Talk, I think, like I said earlier, are two things that stood out to me. Um, because I think with all the food work, clearly we're helping people out. We're helping out community members. Um, and so that's something that you really see in the Black Food Geographies video, where even though they're not doing volunteer work, they do mention how different parts of the community can be helped. So if you look at the like the maps where there are different stores in different areas, one area you'll have one store, and then there's not another store within at least a 10-minute drive, and that's even if you have a car. And then in another area there would be like anywhere from 5 to 7 stores within the 5 to 10 minute drive, and then more people there have cars than in the other areas. And so this is kind of like like a almost obvious thing, like, oh, I see, in these areas, this is how our volunteer work helps, because there's much less access to food in these areas. And so doing things like gardening, which I've also done a little bit of that as well, and even like those food outreach, like if we had something like UGM in that area where we could drive out, or like with Open Door that I've been doing this quarter, all those families and whatnot, they can come to us. And so that's how we can help our community members. And then another thing that was kind of connecting, the themes of what we talked about in class and then also the volunteer work, um, but also kind of combining it into how does it, actually impact the volunteers themselves. And that's where Kamal Bell's TED Talk came up for me. That's where I was really thinking about it because when he started getting the last couple minutes of it, he started talking about some of the boys. So if nobody remembers the Kamal Bell TED Talk, basically what he started a garden and even working with bees. And what he would do is he would take boys like 15, 16-year olds from the schools in the area in his community and start working with them, especially during the summer. And so um, he would basically garden and work on farming with these boys. And like I said, bees, things like that too. And when he asked one of the boys, somebody asked him something about why he does it, and he said, this is the first thing in my life that I have not quit. I was just like, wow, that's so profound. And I was like, that's just like, that's not something you would hear out of a 16-year-old. And then another guy, similar question, and he answered, I like to watch they asked why he likes to, interact with the bees and work with the bees. What does he get out of it? And he says, I like to watch them create something out of nothing. I said, wow, that's so profound. I don't even think I'm 20 now, and I don't really know anybody in my age group that would even say anything like that. Nevertheless, 15, 16-year-old kids, and, thinking back, 4 or 5 years ago when I was that age, that was completely unheard of to ever hear anything like that. And so that's why really looking at this TED Talk and then doing my volunteer work, I was like, wow, I think we obviously, impact the people who are, getting food and things like that. But actually, the people um, who are doing the volunteer work themselves and actually helping out their community, are actually impacted as well. And that was like the biggest thing to me was like, wow, I don't think about this. It's not the obvious thing. And I think that's, going throughout this quarter is kind of how, doing these assignments and doing this volunteer work and actually having to put thought to these things actually kind of brought up some areas that I had never even thought of, despite doing, like I said, I'm 20 and I've probably been doing different homeless outreaches since I was 7. And this is not really something that I've really thought about ever. Um, and so that's why I think that, I mean, obviously this is really important work, but I think that's also the biggest connection that being able to actually do these assignments and actually watch these videos has actually brought to me.